Hey, class, we are at an exciting time in our semester. We are at the midway point. Yes, the middle of our semester. So, guess what that means? First of all, yay, you've made it this far. It's the middle. You're halfway through. Only you finished the first half now, just another half to go. But that also means we are writing a midterm essay this week. Exciting! Yay! Woo! I can't wait to read your essays and see more of your thoughts on these great works by women. Now, you will choose one work to write about from the women that we've studied prior to the turn of the century. So, in any of the other weeks that we've already read and studied about. So, the name of the assignment is Major Paper 1, Historical Criticism Text Analysis, or the midterm paper. And you can find a copy of this written out assignment for the midterm essay in our folder, this week's folder. It's also attached to the Dropbox where you will literally upload your completed midterm essay. So it's accessible in either place, in just as a document in our weeks folder and also as an attached document to the midterm Dropbox. All right, so the due date you can find online in the assignment. You need to upload your essay by that due date. And it should be a Microsoft Word document. If you don't have Microsoft Word, you could write your essay and save it as a rich text formatted document, so RTF, rich text format. We'll preserve it and make it compatible with my Microsoft Word program so that I can use track changes and put in my comments on your essay that way. And the essay needs to be submitted as an attachment, uploaded as an attachment to that midterm Dropbox that's in this week's folder. And it needs to have a particular file name, which I will describe in a little bit. So you can't just call it whatever you want. When you save the document to your computer, make sure you ultimately save it with the file name as described in the assignment. We'll go over that in a little bit. And submit it to that midterm essay Dropbox located in this week's folder. All right, now the paper task. In this paper, or the midterm essay task, you will use historical information as the critical framework by which you will analyze meaning in one literary work of student of your choosing that we have studied from our Women in Literature course readings for the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the 17th century, the 18th century, or the 19th century. So you can choose one work by an author in any of those time periods. So just one of those work, just one work. You don't have to choose one from each time period. No, just one work total, and you will analyze meaning in that from a historical perspective. So you can use biographical information about the author, or you can use historical information, or both, from the time period to help analyze that literary work that you are analyzing for the midterm essay. Kind of like what I do every week when I give you the historical perspective, both on the author's life and the times in which the author lived, and use that to shed some light on what we're reading. And if you want to find, I do some of that obviously in the lecture, but I also do a lot of that if you read my professor's notes that I always publish at the, after you have completed the week's discussion questions, I'll publish then my answers to the discussion questions. And they often contain a lot of historical information and biographical information to help analyze meaning and impact, meaning in the text itself and impact of the text in the time period and perhaps in the author's life. So there you go. Do something along those lines. What you see me do in those professor's notes. Obviously, yours is going to be a full paper length, not as short as my little. Well, sometimes I write long little blurbs, right, on the professor's notes, and sometimes I write shorter ones, But your essay will be between 4 to 5 pages, not including a works cited page. So your works cited page would be in addition to the 4 to 5 pages that you're actually writing for the essay itself or the midterm. All right. So I've listed, if you look at the written out essay assignment, I've listed all the different works that you could choose. Remember, you only choose one work to analyze, one literary work. So you can choose from the Middle Ages and Renaissance. There's Julian of Norwich's From a Book of Showings to the Anchoress Julian of Norwich. That little piece, that excerpt that's in the anthology, you could analyze that. Or you could analyze Marjorie Kemp's From the Book of Marjorie Kemp, that excerpt. Or Anne Askew's The Ballad which Anne Askew made and sang when she was in Newgate. Or Queen Elizabeth I's speech to the troops at Tilbury. or Mary Sidney Herbert's To the Thrice Sacred Queen Elizabeth, or Mary Roth's Song, or Rachel Spate's A Muzzle for Melastomus. So you can choose any one of those works. Or you could choose a work from the 17th and 18th centuries. Those works include Anne Bradstreet's The Prologue, Margaret Cavendish's Female Orations, Afrabane's The Disappointment, and Killigrew's Upon the Saying That My Verses Were Made by Another, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu's Epitaph, Abigail Adams' Remember the Ladies, or Abigail Adams' Absolute Power Over Wives. She wrote, she wrote many letters to her husband, John Adams. Those happen to be two of them. You would choose just one of those if you wanted to analyze one of her letters. John Wheatley's letter sent by the author's master to the publisher. Phyllis Wheatley's To S.M., a young African painter, on seeing his works. Now note, John Wheatley, that he's actually the one male author we read. And we read that because it's interesting how, he felt it important to be able to get this published and read, to write this preface, kind of backing up Phyllis Wheatley as the author of the poetry collection that he facilitated publishing of. So you can write, if you wanted to write on his work, you can. Of course, you would probably discuss Phyllis Wheatley too, because, the whole reason that he's writing it is because of her poetry that he's trying to publish and get readers to read. Then we have Mary Wollstonecraft's From a Vindication of the Rights of Women, introduction. And then we move on to the 19th century. If you want to choose a work from the 19th century, your choices include Dorothy Wordsworth's When Shall I Tread Your Garden Path, Jane Austen's Love and Friendship, Mary Shelley's The Mortal Immortal, Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman, Letitia Elizabeth Landon's Eliel, that was her pen name, The Marriage Vow, that's the poem of hers we read, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's De Jour Sand, A Desire, or Elizabeth Barrett Browning's De Jour Sand, A Recognition, or Elizabeth Barrett Browning's from Sonnets from the Portuguese, the sonnet number, is that XLIII, sonnet number 43. There we go. Sorry, I had to do the math really fast. Convert the Roman numeral to the English, or the Arabic numeral, rather, I should say. Margaret Fuller's From Woman in the 19th Century, that excerpt. Or Harriet Beecher Stowe's excerpt from Uncle Tom's Cabin, Chapter 30, The Slave Warehouse. Or Incidents in the Life of the Slave Girl, Chapter 5, The Trials of Girlhood, by our other Harriet author. Elizabeth Cady Stanton's From Address to the New York State Legislature. And back up there, I forgot to say Harriet Jacobs' last name. Yes, I said our other Harriet, but I forgot to say Jacobs. That's her last name. Harriet Jacobs, Incidents in the Life of the Slave Girl, Chapter 5, The Trials of Girlhood. Of course, Harriet Jacobs used the pseudonym Linda Brent, which is interesting because she used a female pseudonym. We don't have too many female authors from that time period or before or even after until the 20th century using a female pseudonym. So that's unique. Continuing on, you could analyze Elizabeth Cady Stanton's From Address to the New York State Legislature, that excerpt that we had for class, or Emily Bronte's Stanzas, or Florence Nightingale's excerpt from Cassandra that we read for class, or Emily Dickinson's, we actually read 4 of her poems. You would only analyze one of them if you chose to analyze an Emily Dickinson poem. So you could analyze her poem that's numbered 267, or her poem that's numbered 455, or her poem that's numbered 519, or her poem that's numbered 857. So you could analyze any one of those Emily Dickinson poems, but only one. Christina Rossetti's Eve, that's another poem that you could analyze if you wanted. Or Louisa May Alcott's essay, How I Went Out to Service. Now, I say only choose one because the paper length is only 4 to 5 pages, and that's like a sufficient length to analyze one work, especially when you're putting in historical/biographical information. So that's why I'd like you to focus on one work. Just choose one of those works that I just read out to you. All right, now that 4 to 5 page length does not include a works cited page. All right, so the works cited page should be in addition to the 4 to 5 pages. And a works cited page is, of course, where you cite your sources. So whatever information you're using, whatever biographical or historical information, and the work that you're reading itself, and whatever else you use this from another source, you put that biographical information on the works cited page. Now that's when you quote from it, okay? You don't cite things that, if you read it but you didn't use it in the essay, you don't cite that on your works cited page. A works cited page in MLA is only for the works that you actually cite in the essay or the paper itself. And we're using MLA format, so that's why you do it that way. So MLA stands for Modern Language Association. That is the format that most English classes use. All right, so here's the file name. I talked to you before. I said you have to use the proper file name when you save your essay. And you make sure when you upload it, it has that proper file name. So here's that formula for that proper file name. You want to save and send your paper or attach it, as I said, with the following file name. Your full name's initials, so your first, middle, and last name's initials. If you have a middle name, if you don't have one, don't worry about it. Don't put a middle initial in. Followed by a space, and then the letter number string of MP1. So that MP1 stands for Major Paper 1. So that's why I put that in after your initials. Of course, all the letters should be in lowercase. You use your initials so that I can easily identify who wrote the essay. When I just look at the files, I can just see, oh, this is by so-and-so. And use MP1 so I can easily identify that, oh, yes, this is Major Paper 1, the midterm essay. Now, the doc or the docx or the RTF suffix, RTF for rich text format, or the doc or the docx for Microsoft Word, that will automatically be affixed by the computer. You don't have to put that in, and that occurs after the dot in the file name when you save the paper in Microsoft Word or rich text format. That suffix tells other computers what program to use when it opens the file to enable readability. Now, if your name were Martin Luther King, your document's full file name should be MLK MP1. So MLK space MP1, all lowercase. So that way I can just look at the file name and know immediately what the file is and who wrote it. I would know Martin Luther King wrote that one. And it's Major Paper 1. So for you, for your files, for your essay, you save it with your own initials. And if you have 3 initials, first name, middle name, and last name, then you use all 3. If you just have a first name and a last name, then you just use 2. All right, and then you put the space, and then you do MP1. So that's the file name for this paper. All right. And that helps keep it all uniform, and it helps it be clear in my files who wrote what and what each file is. All right, so I can easily identify it without having to open it. All right, now your file format, as I mentioned earlier, it needs to be attached to a Dropbox submission. So you include it as an attached document. And it needs to be, I said, formatted in either Microsoft Word or rich text format. So that my computer can read your paper. If I don't have, if you use some other weird format that not that it's weird, but a format that I don't have, then my computer can't open it and I can't read it, and I use track changes to input comments on the paper so I can give you my feedback right then and there on the paper itself. So that also, it facilitates readability and inputting of my comments. Alrighty, the paper topic. Here's a more detailed explanation of the paper topic and examples. So in this paper, students will analyze elements within a literary work in relation to how the work is informed by and or comments on the history of the time period in which it was composed and or the history of the author's personal life. This type of critical interpretation of literary works is called historical criticism or new historical criticism. So you can use either one, the new approach or the, regular traditional historical criticism approach. More about new historicism in our next video as I continue this explanation of the midterm essay assignment.